down and listen to records. Smell the cover, read all the verses. Tell me about your favorites on Vinyl and Vision.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning into the latest episode of Vinyl and Vision. Here we are with episode 124. Today's very special guest is Django Haskins. So Django is a very accomplished musician who currently lives in North Carolina. He is currently in a band called The Old Ceremony, which is a band that's been around for 20 years now. Very accomplished musician himself, as you know, Django, but also a very accomplished band, being The Old Ceremony. They've done a lot over the past 20 years, done a lot of touring, gigged with a number of very notable people, and have been just building up a reputation for themselves. The best way to describe The Old Ceremony is you have to listen to it. I mean, they cover everything. They are musical chameleons, okay? So they really do a lot, and you know, they're on their new album Earthbound, which is coming out on October 17th on Robust Records. Just using that one album alone as an example, they really just span the gamut of genre. And I find that very interesting. And you know, coming from a primary songwriter, that is also very interesting because, you know, what makes that mind tick is kind of the question that I came up with or that I was kind of interested in. But yeah, Django is a long-time musician, been doing it since he was a very young person. Has released a number of records of his own under his own name, and then as well, 7 albums now with The Old Ceremony. He also has a side project with Gary Louris of the Jayhawks, which is called Au Pair, and that did not get mentioned in our conversation. As a matter of fact, I had very little time. So I kind of had to skip by a lot of things, a lot of touch points that I really kind of wanted to get to. But Django's got a very interesting career. So just to not keep this too long, best thing to do is to listen to the music. What you're listening to currently is one of the singles off of Earthbound called North American Grain. At the end of the episode, I include a short clip of another single off of that album called Lonely Mare. In addition to, Django's project Au Pair, he also is part of the Big Star Review that was kind of, I believe it was started by Chris Easter of the Chris Stamey of the DBs, and possibly Mitch Easter, well-known producer and musician himself. So he does that as well, and so because of that, being involved in that review, he's been able to perform with a number of very notable people whose names I'm not going to mention now. Here, though, in our conversation, he does mention a couple, I believe. So, super crazy, musical career, though, much like the topic of our discussion today, Freedy Johnston, not a celebrated and well-known and well-recognized musician in their own right, or at least on a popular music basis, but respected, very well respected by their community and their peers, which, as I think you'll hear Django say in this conversation, that's kind of what you hope to achieve when you are pursuing a career in music. So, Freedy Johnston, the album of discussion, Freedy Johnston's This Perfect World, released in 1994, produced by Butch Vig. It's his major label debut on Elektra Records. Interesting record. I did not know it, so I had a lot of fun kind of getting into it, learning about it, listening to it, analyzing it, and so forth. And here is a small conversation discussing that with Django Haskins. Just remember, here at Vinyl and Vision, all that we ask is that you please do all the things you do with the internet, like, share, subscribe, rate, and review, please. Those are actually very completely free ways to help support our show and help boost our numbers and all that stuff that kind of keep us moving and grooving, doing the thing. If you care to help us out in a financial way, just visit our website, psychicstatic.net. Please make a purchase, anything at all from there. The links to my stores, my eBay store, as well as the store in the website. Everything there helps go towards funding this project, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much, folks. Enjoy. So, Django Haskins, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Um, oh yeah, so I've been digging into your catalog.
Great.
Okay, so I know that you're part of this band called The Old Ceremony, and you have a new
Yeah.
album coming out soon.
Yep. Yep.
What is the new album called again? Earthbound?
It's called Earthbound. Yep.
And who's
Yeah.
releasing it?
It's a label, North Carolina label called Robust Records. But yeah, so it's the Old Ceremony has been my band for 20 years now, and I'm the songwriter and kind of singer and guitar player for it. And this is our first record in 9 years. We've been all doing a bunch of different projects, but also just kind of living life and raising small people.
Sure.
So this has been, it's really great getting back. It was great getting back into the studio with them, and then now it's great just kind of getting back out there and playing more than we have. We played throughout the whole time, but we're much busier now, kind of than we have and have been since certainly pre-pandemic.
Yeah. Okay. So I listened to I'm pretty sure your entire catalog from
Great.
as far as everything that you've released up to this moment. I've actually dug into your solo work as well, and
Great.
that's kind of what inspired me to want to speak with you in the first place. Because I mean, it's always nice to speak about a person that's got an album coming out. Obviously, you want to promote that thing.
Sure.
But I didn't know anything about you until, Howard approached me with your new album, and I listened to that first, and I was just like, this is a good album. Yeah, I would like to get to know Django better then. But then I dug into everything else, and you're quite a prolific songwriter, it seems.
Yeah, I've been at it for a long time, to be fair, but yeah, there's a lot out there
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I've been a musician since I was 15, but I don't have
Yeah,
nearly the same output that you have. I mean, like, I
sure.
think that there has to be something said about, your ability to write songs.
Right.
Because, I invited you here to speak about an album that was important to you. I'm not sure exactly how that was
Yeah.
delivered to you as far as this, like, because you chose this album by Freedy Johnston, who I also have never heard of.
Oh, wow. Okay, great. Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad I could share that.
Yeah, I mean, so Freedy Johnston's This Perfect World is the album that you chose. And so maybe we can start there with like, why did you choose that record?
Well, it's interesting. The way that we relate to music changes all the time in our lives. Like when we, at least for me, different times in my life. And now I'm at a point where most of the time, if I'm listening to music, it's very deliberate. It's not just kind of, I don't have gobs of free time anymore, And so,
Sure.
but for a very long time in my life, longer than many people, as a musician, I had just loads of free time and to just kind of wallow in records. And this was a record that I have such a visceral connection to. And I went back when I was thinking about what album I would, choose. And I went back and listened to it, and I was just kind of blown away by how well it holds up. I think it's 30 years old, and it's just, certain albums kind of create a space and keep you there through the whole ride, and that's always been something kind of in the back of my mind. If you listen to my solo stuff, I've been really consciously trying to do that more with some of the recent solo records where I put out a record of just piano songs, and then I put out and they're kind of trying to keep a mood together on a record. There's a record called Shadowlawn that's basically no guitar almost. It's just baritone guitar and banjo and synths and vocals, and that's the sound of that record. But with the Old Ceremony, because we have so many different kind of colors, because we have a vibraphone player, and there's organs and keys and violins and guitars and any number of percussion things, and and because I bring in songs that are kind of all over the map stylistically, it's a much more of a challenge for us to make records that do that kind of sit in one space and just keep you there the whole time. And
Sure.
and I mean, I grew up. I've said this before, but I grew up thinking the White Album was like a normal album, in terms of how songs fit together and the kinds of things that work in an album together, where it's just, it's just literally all over the map stylistically. And that appealed to me, I guess, in terms of variety. but also just I didn't really think that records really needed to have just one mood. But there are records that do that. For me, Van Morrison Moondance does that. OK Computer does that. There's certain bands that just kind of made their whole career on that, and that gets a little dull to me. But when you can create an album that just when it comes on, you're just going to leave it on the whole time. Especially these days, that's a really rare thing. And that Freedy Johnston record, I came to it already a fan. Was a fan of his previous record, which was called Can You Fly? And, some of the people that he had kind of working with him, Graham Mabey, who's a bass player for Joe Jackson, Dave Schramm is a great kind of guitar player on a lot of kind of downtown New York stuff, Chris Stamey, who is now a really good friend of mine, but at the time I didn't know, gave a clue to me that was something important to him. These types of music, the Replacements and Big Star and Graham Parsons and all these things that I was also kind of into. But his point of view is very direct. He's from Kansas, and he's like this kind of has this very kind of flat affect when he sings in some ways, but in other ways that kind of makes it all the more affecting when he has these really lush surroundings to his songs. And I love the melodies. I love the lyrics. I love the arrangements are just incredible. And so, I listened through and I was just like, yep, no, that's a really, really great album.
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I mean, I can see where you're coming from with that. I mean, from a newbie, from a first time listener.
Yeah.
I didn't dig into all of his other records, though I had definitely heard about Can You Fly as obviously being like a landmark album for him.
Yeah.
It's kind of like brought him a lot of his critical acclaim.
Right.
And this album being
that was the follow-up.
The follow-up and his major label debut.
That's right. Yeah, and that song, the first song, "Bad Reputation," which is the only one that most people have ever heard, was used in a Jim Carrey movie. I don't know, Me, Myself, and I, or something. Or
Kingpin.
Oh, was it in Kingpin? Okay.
It's Kingpin.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I did actually kind of catch that. I think I actually kind of made the connection that was just like I know I heard this song somewhere, but I didn't know where. Started to do the research, and that's what I found out. It's been used in placement in a few other places as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of in the fabric of our times, of like maybe our generation. So,
well, as a very long time songwriter, I relate to him more and more, except for that little island of success, in that he's just still making records, and to a mainstream audience, he's not known at all, but he's really respected, I think, at least in my world.
That's what I gathered. That's what I.
And I love that. And I've met him, and he's a very nice guy. I actually interviewed it on my college radio station one time, and the thing I took away from it was he sang so quietly. He'd be right up on the mic, and he would sing like this. And I was like, why isn't this guy singing? And I knew that he was on tour, and that was maybe he was saving his voice, but also listening back, it sounded amazing. And he'd learned something that some singers have learned, which is that the quieter you sing, the bigger your voice is going to sound. I learned that also. Ira Kaplan from Yo La Tengo, we do this Big Star kind of series of concerts for the last 12 years together. And he also sings incredibly quietly right up on the mic, and it gives a sound to his vocals.
It's also maybe their comfort level. Like it's something, because I'm not a very good singer. I don't feel like I'm a good singer. But I feel like that exact thing where if you use a good microphone with like a good preamp or something, so it's like, it picks up very well, and then you sing quietly into it closely, you kind of hear yourself, like maybe you have better control, because if you're pushing yourself maybe too hard, too far, you kind of you don't feel like you can land those notes properly.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is a lot of people do the exact opposite for the same reasons, essentially, because they are using more muscle, they feel they have more control. Jeff Tweedy, who's another person that I've kind of gotten to know over the years, he does the opposite. He sings way off the mic, like strangely far off the mic, and quite loud, even for quiet stuff, and that's his sound. He likes that sound, because further from the mic, you get less bass. And he likes that kind of thinner mid-range sound. So it's interesting. Yeah.
It's your preference of your tool, your voice. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, now, so you said something kind of interesting. You said how the White Album was a kind of a gateway for you to kind of understanding like what records could be like or should be like, maybe.
Hmm.
So let's go back. Why, like, how did you get introduced to that and or why?
Well, my name's Django. I was raised by hippie parents, and they had, they had Beatles records and all those things around the house, and I listened to it a lot.
Yeah.
Um, but when I say the White Album, I think it's it's a record that really kind of has a disregard for the idea that an album has to have a sound or two
Hmm.
sounds, or three sounds. Partly because they were each working individually on their tracks and they didn't really care what the other guys were going to do, but also just that's just to them that was perfectly reasonable.
Right.
And the next thing I would hear would be, Joshua Tree, which is a brilliant album, but is one of those albums that just starts and continues until the end, and it's just one feeling
Hmm.
essentially, and it's great, but
Yeah.
it's the opposite in that way.
Right.
And I think for me, the reason I do connect with both, which is, this Freedy Johnston is kind of this beautiful combination of both because the songwriting is incredible, in my opinion, very specific, very moving. The melodies are great. The harmonies are really interesting. But it stays in one semi mood, like, kind of, it goes up
Hmm.
and down, but it has this kind of coherence to it.
Yeah.
I think as a songwriter, I tend to hear records, or I tend to make records, I guess, thinking about individual songs first,
Mm.
and what
Okay.
that particular song requires or would work with. And then I step back, or the band, we step back and we say, oh, how is this going to work, together? Do we need to drop some of these? Or
Hmm. Okay.
so I think that's part of it, is just that I'm really like to tune into the individual song as a kind of a standalone piece of work, kind of a miniature art.
Song,
So
right? You said
yeah, the
the
song,
song.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because as an album, I mean, so like let's just use your new album as an example. I mean, so I was listening to that
Let's.
and that I mean that's it's a what's the word for it? A cornucopia
Yeah.
of variety, right?
Hmm.
Because you have a number of different types of styles of music that are all represented on this one piece that is the album, not the song. Each
That's
song
right.
individual is its like own little piece. So,
Right.
and so, I mean, I don't know. I guess that's kind of come from all the way from like your childhood, from your youth of being
Yeah.
exposed to music. It's always you've wanted a variety always. It's never been like I wanted one thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I didn't really relate to I didn't relate that much to any one kind of movement. Like I liked some, kind of punk rock stuff, and I liked some hard rock stuff, and I liked some jazz, and I liked some classical. But I didn't feel that I was one of those groups, that I really belonged to any one of. But the thing that I kind of across the board
Hmm.
responded to was songwriting or
Yeah.
songcraft, I guess. And so
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, I think with the old ceremony, we've been together long enough. We've developed kind of different modes that we have as a band, and so I'll bring in a song, and it's pretty easy for the band to go, "Oh, it's this type of song that we do," or it's this
Uh-huh.
type of song. Um, there's the kind of folkier mode, and there's the kind of noiry, sometimes tango or bossa or something kind of mode, and then there's
Yeah.
rock, just like rootsy kind of rock stuff,
Right.
and somehow, I hope over the years we've developed enough of a sound that people who are familiar with our records are comfortable with all of them. They've been white albumed enough by us that
Yeah.
they can
Yeah.
handle it. And I think the
Okay.
vocals and the lyrics and the writing and the playing of each of the individuals across the records and the whole body of work is enough to tie it together so that it doesn't feel completely random.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that your fan base obviously must be of the same mindset where it's just like, hey, I'm okay with listening to all different types of things
Right.
because they know to expect that of you.
Right. Right.
You know, for you to make like an album that would be just like one style of music, basically, would probably be weird to one of
It
your
would be
fans.
very strange. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they'd be like, when is it going to change? This is
Yeah.
getting boring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right.
Okay. All right. Well, so now back to your childhood. So where did you grow up?
I grew up in Gainesville, Florida, which
Oh,
is
right.
mostly in my world mostly known as Tom Petty's hometown.
Sure.
Apart from that, that's pretty much all I would say about the state of Florida.
Well, that's where the fest is held every
That's
year.
right. Yeah, the fest is held there. Yeah.
I've been there on one occasion for the fest
Uh huh.
specifically. Can't say much about Gainesville otherwise.
It's a nice town. It's a college town, very similar to
It's okay.
Chapel Hill, where I live now,
Okay.
but but more Florida. Um,
Hmm.
but I went down and played the fest one year, and it was a year that James Brown and well, James Brown was playing, and Bo Diddley showed up because he lived actually near Gainesville, and they did. I'm a Man together, and I watched it from the side of the stage with them doing James Brown and Bo Diddley doing I'm a Man
Wow.
on one mic. It was really yeah, that was a real highlight.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it. That's like legendary shit right there.
Yeah, totally.
So, growing up in Gainesville, Florida, you said your parents were hippies, and actually, they were folk singers, correct?
They were, yeah. In the '60s, they did a kind of a Ian and Sylvia kind of duo thing called the Haskins, and they would travel around and kind of play in clubs and stuff. They were doing covers, but they kind of use that. I think for them, they both are very musical and love music, but I think it was as much a means of having that lifestyle of being able to travel around and having the kind of experiences that they got,
Hmm.
as much as a drive in particular to play music.
Yeah. So you as a child in the household, were they still kind of gigging at the time that you were
Oh
born?
no, no, no!
They
They had
stopped.
stopped long before before I was born. But we
Oh,
would
okay.
play jazz. Honestly, around the house there was some kind of old rock and roll stuff, but also there was a lot of folk and a lot of jazz standards,
Hmm.
and and those are two things that I definitely love.
Yeah. Well, so then, I mean, I guess it seems like it's, no question that you would have gotten into music, but I mean, how do you feel like that happened? Like, what was your introduction to playing instruments?
Well, when I was 5, I started learning classical violin and kind of soldiered through that for about 7 or 8 years. But
You didn't like it?
I liked it okay. It just wasn't,
Okay.
I was not, I don't think I was disciplined enough for one thing. But then I discovered guitar and that was it. And I was off at 13. I'm 50, so it's been a
Hmm.
while. And from then, since I was 13, I've had a band uh, ever since. Without,
13.
yeah, since I was 13. Even I
Cool.
lived in China for a year, and I put together a group there. Like I've
Really?
always led a band
Yeah.
my whole life, essentially. It's a very it's just been a big part of my life.
Right, right. Okay. Well, that's cool. How was that in China? Like,
It was weird.
obviously you learned the language, right?
I spoke Mandarin. But I was there for a year, and I actually met this Japanese guy, Sato Saichi, who was had like a Steve Vai Ibanez guitar with like the monkey grip, and he was a super nice guy. And I just taught him a bunch of songs that I was writing, and we would perform in like the local bar, and it was mostly like expats from all over the world.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was it's an experience. I mean, I think anything that kind of takes you out of your normal context and says, well, yeah, but how does this play in some other context musically, is helpful because if I were just playing for people exactly like me, I would get more and more specific in terms of the kind of music I play. But like because I don't know what's going to appeal to a bunch of people from you know parts of the world that I don't know really much at all about, and so I had
Right.
to kind of I would try different things, and that was I think a a pretty formative process for me as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I can imagine. I don't have much experience playing internationally, but I can, yeah, any experience you develop, especially as a musician, is going to color your ability going forward, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Especially in the handicap of language barrier.
Well,
I
that's a
mean,
big one. Yeah, if you're into
yeah.
lyrics, it's a tough one.
Well, even so, I mean, you wrote some songs with using the Mandarin language, right?
I did. I've written a couple. Yeah.
And now, so like as a American listener, and I come across a song of yours that's in Mandarin, I
Hmm.
don't understand what you're singing. But you also, it's a tool for you, whereas you know how to create the song regardless of like the language barrier. There's something that has to happen there, regardless of what you understand you're saying, you're singing, to how is it going to you know reach the listener.
Right. Well, I mean, it's kind of just a lesson in that lyrics are great and important and can be a wonderful part of music, but music communicates a lot of other things.
Right.
So yeah.
And even or without even the understanding of the language.
Right. Yeah. So we cover a song, this 50 or 60s Greek song called Efige by Stelios Kazandatis, who I hadn't heard of, but I heard the song on The Wire, of all things. And
Okay.
I thought, man, that is a cool song. It sounds a lot like our band. And I went into rehearsal the next week, and our drummer had heard it, and he had thought the same thing. And so we learned it. I learned it phonetically. I don't speak Greek.
Hmm.
And it did. It was just like really very much like what we do.
Hmm.
And we sing it all the time. And I don't know, I mean, I know the general gist of the song, but I don't know what each line means.
Right.
But I've been doing it for, I don't know, 10 years or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's still really fun to play. So,
Okay. Yeah. No, I mean, it happens a lot, I guess, now that I think about it. Considering I was just speaking with a gentleman recently who is living in India and who actually has a lot of affinity for Indian music, is
mm.
even before he moved there, like for work related purposes. And I think he was introduced to it by uh, Mr. Bungle.
Oh, yeah.
Because Mike Patton
Yeah.
does a lot of uh,
Yeah.
different singing in Italian, and I guess this was in Hindi.
Uh-huh.
So like he was doing some cover song of a song from a soundtrack. I don't remember
Right.
exactly the
Like a
story,
Bollywood
but
thing. Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and so those things reach people, and I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of like, how does music communicate? And and there's not one answer, obviously.
Right.
Um, but, that's kind of part of the whole process is kind of figuring that out.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we should probably move on a little bit here. I have quite a bit of stuff. I mean, I did a lot of research for this discussion
Oh,
tonight
thank you.
on Freedy and on you. Now, you said you met him. You had interviewed him in college.
Yes, I did once. Yeah.
Did you have
And
any professional interaction with him more
I didn't.
recently?
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right. But it's not like it's impossible. I mean, he's still
No.
touring and
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah, yeah. Actually, he just recently played a place, kind of a backyard concert series in LA that I've played in the last few
yeah.
years. Just so, yeah, we have in similar circles.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Because based on interviews that I have read and listened to of his, he seems a little difficult. And I say that not like being judgmental of him, but that like almost like he's like neurotic. Does that seem
Oh,
right?
I don't know, to be perfectly honest, but
Okay.
I mean, that wouldn't surprise me of really any songwriter. I don't really read interviews and or watch interviews very much, but yeah, no, I don't know. For me, it's the art and the person are really pretty separate. I mean, if
Hmm.
someone's if, I'm not going to listen to like John Wayne Gacy's record, but I mean,
Hmm.
but if someone's just difficult or whatever, I mean, Dylan's, I would imagine, rather
Sure.
difficult,
Yes.
but still important to me,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean, I tend not to seek it out, to be
Right.
perfectly honest. But yeah, I believe that.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Because and I don't know. I mean, maybe that it's his personality because like his songwriting, it seems, from what I understand about this record, it's definitely he definitely kind of tackles difficult and interesting subjects.
Yeah, yeah, he does, and he seems to have a lot of empathy in them. So that's,
Yeah.
I think a big part of it too for
Well,
me.
it's very much like a storyteller.
Yeah,
These are short stories. That's definitely something I've read was that like, he's this like all-American, like wonderful songwriter.
yeah, I think that's true. Yeah,
Yeah. And he
yeah,
and he develops these stories like there's these characters that just kind
yeah,
of out of nowhere. I mean, and like I can corroborate that a little bit based on some of the interviews that I've heard and read with him, that that some of them are not necessarily based from any kind of life experience. They're
Yeah.
there's fiction.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that struck me listening back to this record, to This Perfect World, is um, the opening lines of songs will just drop you in media res. You know, it's just like in the middle of her confession,
Hmm.
he, leans over and draws her near. It sets up the whole scene immediately in the first line. It's not like it was a good day, and I mean, and that's a very kind of short story. Like when you don't have a lot of time to tell your story, you got to drop in at an important point.
Right.
And I think there was a lot of that on the record that I really appreciated. Another thing that I really love about this record, and listening back to it, and I realized that this happens on a lot of his records, or at least Can You Fly, and the one before that, which was not really known at all, but it was called The Trouble Tree.
Hmm.
Is he often, he has kind of the full band experience kind of songs, but then, the core of it is really the acoustic guitar and vocal and song. And
Right.
as a songwriter who also plays solo and, has been lucky enough to play with the same band for 20 years, I love both, and so I always really appreciated he would have the last track of an album, or towards the end, if not the very last track, was almost always a very stripped down, just acoustic guitar and vocal, just kind of laying the song bare kind of song, and often very elegiac. And I think that that was something I really internalized early on with our records. The last track of pretty much any old ceremony record tends to be, it's not a big like celebration. It tends to be kind of elegiac and often kind of smaller,
Yeah.
production wise.
Okay.
And I really appreciate that. And again, it's kind of the White Album thing, where some things are big with horn sections and strings, and some things are just Mother Nature's son with the guitar,
Right.
or Blackbird with just a click. So I think I really like that kind of variety of scale of oral scale
Yeah.
on those records.
Okay. Now, actually, I skipped right past this. When did you get exposed to this record, and how?
The day it came out, because I was a really big fan, and I have a friend named Pete Gallup, who's a really great songwriter in New York, and I was living in New York, and we went to what was it called? HMV. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. So,
Yeah, it's what, a record store.
one of those.
The day it came out, and bought it, and went back to his apartment and just sat around a boombox and listened to the whole record. And I guess that was in 2004, and
94.
I mean, yeah, 94, yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember it. The day it came out is when I was introduced to it, and
Interesting.
really, I knew that it was a really special record at the time, and I think I think it holds up.
So in 94, you're living in New York. You were obviously a musician. You moved there to follow a musical career, right?
Actually, now that I think about it, 94, I would have been my last year of college, so I was probably just visiting in New York at the time. But yes,
Oh.
I was playing. I had a band in college as well, but yeah, no, I think I was just visiting Pete, who was from New York.
Oh, okay. So then,
And then I moved to China in 95, and then to New York in 96.
okay. All right. So in 94, when this album comes out and you get it for the first time, you're in college, your final year.
Yeah,
You are already a songwriter, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
So you're already kind of, what else are you like listening to at that time in your life?
I was getting into Elvis Costello a lot,
Oh,
and
okay.
Nick Drake and the Replacements and Big Star,
Oh,
things that are really big for me, and Tom Waits. Those were ones I was just starting to get into, and Randy Newman.
oh,
All of these are still on my kind of musical Mount Rushmore.
of
Um,
course, they're
yeah,
they're essential.
yeah,
Now that's funny because I mean, you seem to share a lot with Freedy.
yeah. I think that's true. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I mean, background wise, of his own inspirations to be a songwriter, like those are them, really.
Yeah, I think
Same.
he's also maybe a little bit more into the like the real prairie stuff, like the Towns Van Sant and that kind of thing, which to be perfectly honest, I'm not a huge fan of. But yes, I think we share a lot of similar proclivities.
Yeah. Okay. Um, let me jump back to your songwriting because as I was saying before, you're prolific. Obviously, I think that you do a lot of writing, and I can only imagine that it comes easy to you. Are there any pointers that you could give to aspiring songwriters out there?
Well, it's funny. So, I have been writing songs for a very long time, and for a long time when I was, living in New York and trying to make a living there doing it, I would write every day after whatever my, you know, nameless day job would have been, and then when I was once there's a period of time here when I was living. I've been in North Carolina for 22 years. I moved here in 2002, and there was a period of time when I was writing a lot, and then there was a big long stretch of time where I really just wasn't writing much then, and then the pandemic happened, and I joined a group of friends who were all kind of ex-New York songwriters who many of us knew each other before. And we had a songwriting meeting on Monday nights on Zoom. And we had it every week it's still going. I unfortunately haven't been there for a year or so, but I was going every week. I went to 120 of these meetings. And every week, so everyone would bring a new song.
Right.
And we play it, get feedback, move on. And so I wrote 115 new songs over a period of about a year and a half or 2 years, which was just insane to me, because I had written maybe 30 in the previous 3 years, or 20 or something. So what I learned from that experience of coming back, kind of later on in my middle years to writing as a really steady practice is that if you show up and you do it consistently and you give yourself the space to do it, you can do it. And the other thing is, if you're writing a song a week, you can write some terrible songs. It's great. It doesn't matter. You can write a song made up entirely of farts, but like the point is you wrote a song. That's all that matters, because when you do these songs, they kind of compost in your subconscious. And if you didn't like one, a piece of it might come back once it decomposes and recompose in another song. So you're creating a richer soil for what you're writing, the more you write, no matter what you write.
Right.
And if you write enough songs, also, it'll push you to take different approaches in every way, musically, lyrically, in terms of if you're playing it on guitar, voicings and tunings and, everything, because you got to try a little bit of everything. And so that was really, really great for me. I got to a point where I was so drowning in new songs that I started worrying that I was never going to get them out at all. And I've put out, I've put out one solo record that's called Lost World, which is some of the piano stuff, which had that was all from those songs. And then this Earthbound is all from that period as well. But I've got like 10 more records to make from these songs. So I actually stopped writing every week. And instead, with my tiny little slice of my own time to do things, I've been learning tenor sax. And so every morning for the last 2 years, I've been practicing tenor saxophone. And that's my practice right at the moment. And I love it more than someone should love learning an instrument, because I just love it so much. But but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, gosh, I really need to get back into the regular writing and making that space, because I know that that's what it takes.
Okay. I love that mindset, and I actually really love your analogy too about kind of like gardening, kind of like having it kind of regrow into something different. But I mean, so do you think is there a best way, do you think, or a best method to approach writing?
Nope.
Aside from just kind of like making
I think
yourself
it's just
do
doing
it every day.
Literally just doing it, and not saying, oh, this better be good, or no, this is dumb. I mean, you really don't. Okay. You shouldn't do that. Later on, you can do that once you've written it.
Sure.
But the thing that stops people from finishing songs or from writing songs beyond just the initial thought of writing is that critic, the kind of conscious mind that's saying, well, people will think I'm this or that or an idiot or whatever. And I think, that's anything you can do to bypass that kind of conscious, critical thinking early on in the process is helpful.
Okay. Um, Another kind of follow-up to that is, do you think there is a more of a natural ability, or is there a practice that helps keep up momentum?
I think it's both. I mean, if you're not doing the practice, it doesn't. You can be a brilliant songwriter, but you're not going to write a lot of songs. So, I mean, I think it's both. But I think really what it is, more than maybe more than both of those, is an openness to kind of sensory input, whether it's ideas for songs or musical ideas or sounds or anything like that in regular life and just kind of daily life, becoming someone who kind of takes things in and maybe stores them again for later use, I think is really helpful. And when I hear a songwriter who is clearly curious and open beyond what you might think is their primary kind of genre, I can tell, it's just richer. When you can tell someone's a fan of a lot of kinds of music, than if someone just does, one thing and that's what they listen to and that's what they play.
Yeah.
So I think
Now,
being a student helps, being a student of music, of
okay.
songwriting.
Yeah. Now bringing it back to comparing you to Freedy, I mean, like the one of the things that I had I don't remember if it was read or listened to or whatever, but he had actually mentioned how he has a hard time writing songs. Like
Huh.
sometimes he has taken years to finish a song.
Mm. Hmm.
So I think that that's interesting. And so getting a little perspective from you, I'm hoping this will reach him and hopefully
Hopefully, yeah.
motivate him to or give him some pointers on what to do or maybe where he should focus some of his energy.
Well, everyone has their different process, and I mean, he's very likely a perfectionist, and I'm
Hmm.
not. Um,
Oh, really?
I kind of, yeah, I'm really not. I mean, I want what I do to be good, and I do my best, but
Right.
it's probably one of my failings is that I'm not a perfectionist, but it also allows me to have a little bit more freedom in terms of kind of trying and creating different stuff.
And a
So
faster turnaround, I guess.
yeah, yeah. I mean, for what? Who knows? But it's just that's just how my brain works. So that's how I do it. I think
Yeah.
my friend who introduced me to Freedy's music and who I mentioned earlier, Pete Caleb, he takes years to write a song, and they're all great, but
Hmm.
it takes a very long time. So I don't think one is better than the other. I think there are challenges of each. You can drown in your own production, your own songs, piles of songs, if you write a song a week and you've been doing it for years,
Uh-huh.
or you can wait for 10 years to put out a record if it takes a really long time. So,
Yeah. Okay. Well, well, you're really good at what you do.
oh, thank you.
Like I said, I've listened to, I'm pretty sure everything that you've put out
Wow,
so far.
that's impressive. You,
I've
you're the
had
one then.
I've had some time. Oh yeah, did you see the uptick in your
Yeah, yeah. I saw one person was listening.
Yep, that was me. But I mean, some of your songs, like they really know how to hit. Like, I think there was a song that you had called Murmur.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I remember listening to that and thinking, what an amazing metaphor.
No, thanks.
Like the way that you describe, like what you describe in it lyrically, I was just like thinking, I was like, I hope that this isn't coming from a truly honest and personal place where it's like you're coming from a point of pain.
Well, it's interesting that, so that particular one, I like that one as well. I haven't played it for years, but but it was, talking about kind of sources of where do songs come from, and
Mm,
that I had a girlfriend at the time who had an irregular heartbeat. That was just like a thing that she had, and
yeah.
so I took that, and it wasn't, I took that, I borrowed that, and then wrote the song, and it wasn't a one-to-one thing, but because it was coming from a particular experience or a situation that I observed, that this was a thing
Yeah.
that I had observed, it helped me use it in a different way, and I think when you talk about what my guess would be about, I don't know, I can't speak for Freedy, but in terms of him saying it, like, this one that's about a victim of assault and how she, or whatever, but I made it up. I think I believe that, but I think that there's always it's always a when you're making something up, you're still drawing on real life. If you're
Right.
writing a song or anything, a book, and so sometimes the most affecting ones to me are the ones that are clearly made up, but emotionally they're real.
Hmm.
And the fact that it's that has that kind of hybrid nature, where it's fictional, but boy does it feel personal. Uh, I think there's something about that I find really appealing. And
Yeah.
also, as a person who I don't like writing kind of diary entry songs anymore, maybe I did, when I in my 20s. And so it allows me to access an emotional world without it just being, this is what happened to me yesterday.
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
that is important for longevity as a writer, is you don't have to create chaos in your life anymore to have things to write about, you
You
know?
can make up the chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of chaos out there if you just tap
Yeah.
into it. Right.
Right. Right.
Right.
Okay. Let me see. I have a quote from Freedy from a article from the Los Angeles Times in 1994. He says, quote, "I'm not a morbid, totally depressed person," says Johnston, 33 at the time. Quote, "but I do kind of tend to be a pessimist or maybe more of a realist. I always see the poignancy and the bittersweet angle in something before I see the joy.
Hmm.
That's a problem I have, but at least I admit it."
Yeah. There you go. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's kind of to speak to what we're talking about as far as songwriting and the, where you find your inspirations from and kind
Hmm.
of, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, what I've gathered from, researching each of the songs that are on this record, as I had said before, I mean, they touch on some very serious and dark topics.
Yeah.
And I think that that quote kind of speaks to a lot
Yeah.
of this content. Um,
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a worldview and a kind of just a kind of emotional makeup kind of thing, that different
yeah.
people have their way of doing, of seeing the world, and it comes out in their songs.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start getting into these songs a
Okay.
little bit.
Great.
So you start with the first song called Bad Reputation,
That was the big one.
the big hit,
Yeah.
yes. Number 54 in the
Ah, well,
charts at the time.
big time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it had
Yeah.
obviously placements in places like it. Yeah, definitely served him well.
Hmm.
Um, One thing I find interesting, I'm not about this song specifically, but about the history, like Freedy's history, and kind of maybe at this moment in time. This is his major label debut record, and this was produced by Butch Vig.
Hmm.
And one thing I came across in the research that he had mentioned was how he felt like he had imposter syndrome because a lot of this acclaim came so quickly. With the
I
record
see.
before this one, Can You Fly, getting a lot of critical acclaim, he was a fairly new songwriter. Like,
Mhm. Huh.
the old ceremony has been around for 20 years now, so obviously
Yeah.
you are very much a veteran of
Yeah.
the music industry.
Yeah.
But him at the time in 94, releasing this third album, I mean, like he said at that times he was playing with these people on tour and he didn't even know how to tune his guitar properly.
Right. Right.
So like
Yeah.
there's just a lot of
Interesting.
this inexperience going on in his world at the time, like dealing with this like massive kind of promotional music machine thing.
Hmm. I mean, it reminds me of the thing about the Beatles where they met Elvis and they came away feeling really bad for him because they were just like, he's one of the only people on earth who could understand what we go through, but he's
Mhm.
alone and we have
Right.
each other.
Right.
And I think the thing about Eddie Vedder and Kurt Cobain is they had a band
Yeah.
to do it with, whereas Freddie, I think he had a group, but it was because it was him, it was his name.
Yeah.
He probably felt pretty isolated, I would imagine. I can't speak for him, but
Right.
that's what I would
Right.
imagine. And so yeah, I mean, I feel really lucky having a band that I've known for 20 years. Not that
Mm.
we're bracing for stardom, but just the vicissitudes of just like the drags of playing and driving and promoting and things, just having other people who are at least in it with you, I think
Right.
makes a big difference.
Yeah, they can shelter some of the weight or the burden maybe.
Yeah, or at least they can relate. At least
Hmm.
they're involved.
Yeah. Okay, well, so now the song Bad Reputation, a line in the lyrics that hit a nerve with me was where he sings, "Suddenly I'm on the street, 7 years disappear below my feet, been breaking down."
Yeah.
Um, have you had a moment where you noticed 7 years disappeared under your feet?
No, not really. But I do love the way that kicks into the chorus and it comes from a minor to a major key, and it's just such a lift. Like that chorus is just like just you just start sailing into the sky on that chorus,
Hmm.
and that's something that I really love. There's also kind of um, a pedal point at the top as he plays that kind of continues, that creates that kind of that feeling. It was actually a thing that happened a lot in that period, 90s and aughts, I think, on with guitar arrangements. But it kind of creates this elongation of sound as you move through chords that I really love. So it had those two aspects: the lift of the chorus, and then this kind of jangly drone essentially on top that I thought was really cool.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I didn't pick up on that stuff. I mean, like I think I know what you mean when you say it, when you describe it, but
Yeah.
it's not something that's stuck out in my mind as like evident, you know?
Here, see if we can hear it. I've got a guitar here. It's an
Sure.
electric, but
Is
so
that
this
G C
this stuff,
D?
yeah, essentially, yeah. I mean, it's all normal chords, it's all the usual chords, but it's this. Suddenly I'm on the street, 7 years disappear below my feet, been breaking down. Do you want me now? Do you want me now? Suddenly I'm down in Herald Square. It has this kind of ringing to it that really makes it. There's just a feeling that I get when that kicks in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the progression too, is just like how it kind of like grows from there. So it was, what was it? G, C, D is the kind of primary progression from the verse into the chorus, which you went to an E.
Well, the chorus is E minor.
E
I
minor.
know I got a bad reputation. And then G, A
Yeah.
minor, C, E minor, D. So it's really E minor is kind of the center of it, and then it goes to this, just jumps to the relative major to the G as the home bass, and that kind of lifts.
Hmm. Okay. Interesting. See, so I mean, you have a very mo much more of a profound sense of like kind of structure than I do.
I think about it a lot. I mean, not this song, but I think about song structure like all the time. So
Right. I
yeah.
mean, like when you're writing, I mean, do you like where do you start with us when you're writing a song?
It depends, but most of the time, as I mentioned before, I'm trying to trick my conscious brain into not being involved as long as possible. So I'll try to kind of get into some sort of semi-fugue state where I'm on guitar or piano or whatever it is, trying not to think, often just moving fingers and hands,
Yeah.
and until I find something that I kind of like, and then I'll try to hold on to it and see. So
But so
often
you
it does
do,
start that way.
so
Fishing.
you jam alone. You don't necessarily
I
like
jam
just
alone.
yeah,
Down album, ba-dum.
nobody
Yeah.
else.
Down album, ba-dum. Yeah. I just sit around kind of playing in circles until I find something to grab onto. And in piano, it's the same thing, except for I know less on piano, so it's easier to get lost.
Yeah, but so you don't like grasp an idea that comes to mind like as you're out doing something, and then have to kind of like like beatbox the idea into a recorder
I do
or
that sometimes,
yeah.
but more likely I would have an idea of what I wanted to write about beforehand, and then I would figure out. I'd still have to start at the beginning with the music.
Hmm.
I don't usually come up with the music, away from instruments. But yeah, I mean, it can happen any way at
Yeah,
all,
yeah,
but
sure.
that's, I think, my standard kind of way of trying to do it.
Yeah, I think that because with the amount of musicians I've been speaking to lately, I think that that was something that I've heard a lot lately,
Hmm.
where a lot of the people that I speak with say like, well, I just like heard this thing in my brain, and then I had to go try to figure out what it was like
Hmm.
on an instrument.
Yeah, well, that's great when that happens. It
Well, I
does
mean, if you can
occasionally.
find
Yeah.
it.
Well, sure. Yeah. I guess
But
there's
maybe
that.
you find something that's similar, like, it's not exactly what you heard in your mind, but now you're like, well, this kind of works too. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I think openness is key and flexibility as before it's kind of hardened when it's still soft, in the mold.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to the next song.
All right.
Evie's Tears.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
That's
apparently.
in the middle of her confession. Right. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Evie's Tears apparently refers to sexual abuse, evidently
That's
by a priest.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, really upsetting song, and the music is perfect for it, the way it unfolds, the melody.
Yeah.
What's interesting also, just to kind of jump ahead, is Evie's Garden appears towards the end of the record, which is, one of the things I think that makes this record feel unusually coherent. And on it, it's a different song, but it uses some of the same melody. But it's a different song.
Yeah. Okay.
And I love that idea, that you can just kind of take this element and write a different song with it and put them both on the record and let them relate to each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like a reprise.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, but a very different song. I mean, but the chords and everything. I mean, I haven't sat down and figured them out, but they seem to be pretty different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I think it happens on a couple of occasions. I can't think of a good example right now, but there is definitely where there is a connection kind of thematically
Mm-hmm.
between songs that are on a record. And
Yeah.
this seems to be one of those situations where it's like, I say it's a reprise only because of the connection, really.
Right.
It's not like a different take on the same chord structure or progression or
Right.
whatever. Yeah.
Right.
It's weird.
Yeah, and it's interesting in this kind of context too, because it's not, a Yes record where it's just they're coming in, they're going to recreate Lord of the Rings as a theme album or something. It's a collection of songs by a songwriter. So to do that, I found was really effective, and I don't hear it a lot
Yeah.
in those kinds of records.
Right.
I think Wilco kind of at their best does that sometimes a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of threads things through, but it's not standard.
No, no, I don't think so. And now that you mentioned this, I mean, do you think there's a theme to this record at all?
I don't know. I think there's an emotional center,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of how you feel when you listen to the record. But I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, well, because we'll touch on it when we get there, but now that because you mentioned that, I mean, obviously the connection between this character of Evie on this song, Evie's Tears, and then later on into Evie's Garden,
Hmm.
there seems to be a connection, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, sure. You got to assume that was intentional.
right? But then in
Yeah.
my experience with analyzing this music a little deeper, I think there may be another connection which we're going to get to.
Oh, okay.
Um, So let's see, Evie's Tears. I heard Freedy speak about this on Adam Carolla's podcast,
Hmm.
and he said it wasn't about anyone. Evie was essentially made up, and it kind of came together phonetically. Like he was
I
just
love
kind
that.
of like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, trying to create the melody, or he had the melody and trying to figure out the words, just kind of like singing
Da da
along.
da 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 da.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and Evie just kind of fit.
Yeah. Da da
Um,
da. Right.
so I
That
mean,
makes
what
sense.
is your experience with lyrics just arriving?
I totally relate to that because I think the first thing that I do, it's kind of like walking into a dark room, where it's not completely dark, but at first you can't really see anything, and then you start seeing like the kind of outlines, the general outlines of the furniture and the things in the room, and then as your eyes adjust, you start seeing clearer outlines and more
Definition.
details. And I feel like that with
Yeah.
lyrics, you kind of where roughly are they in space, and then okay, well then what are these words going to be? What are they going to sound like? And then what, and so they kind of come into focus for me a lot of the time after kind of roughing them in like that with just nonsense sounds.
Yeah. Has any nonsense stuck?
Yeah, occasionally I think so. Yeah, I mean, well, sure. Yeah, there's plenty of nonsense in my songs, but I mean, yeah, I mean, I think if a line or a word sounds good, sometimes that trumps a conscious meaning, and sometimes later, the thing is, it's all interpretation, you can go back to and interpret a line in many different ways, and none is right or wrong. Really, it's like there's the initial intent, but then there's the effect, and the songwriter can have an intent, but that doesn't mean that that's how people have to or are going to understand it. So, I tend to be kind of loose with that in terms of like, well, this is what I was thinking when people ask,
Yeah.
but what does it mean to you? I mean, because like really, I think once it's out there, there's no right answer per se. If someone says, "Oh, this means you're a fascist," I'll be like, "No, it doesn't." But other than that, I think the fun of it is if you've left some room for people to interpret it, where it's not like, well, obviously he means this because he just said that like completely straightforwardly. And so I think that's the other thing, is finding the line between kind of poetic openness and meaning, and trusting that you've put enough structure and meaning in there that you can leave some openness for the listener to kind of create their own meaning or complete the meaning in their own way. And I think one of my big gripes, if we're reaching out to other songwriters, with Elvis Costello, who I love, but is that he overwrites for me. He tells me way too much. Like he could cut his lyrics all in half and they would be just some of the greatest songs of all time. But for me, a lot of them, he just wants to make sure that we understand it the way he wants you to understand it. And to me, that's not, that's not my favorite way to experience songs. Whereas Tom Waits, or even Randy Newman sometimes, or Paul Simon, will leave space without explaining. And, it's very possible that people will think it's something that they didn't intend, but it respects the audience enough to allow them room to put themselves and their own story and their own interpretations and their own kind of emotional reaction in the song, and therefore connect with it.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense. Sure. With that being said, we're going to move on to the next song, Can't Sink This Town. So
yeah, that seems like a fun one. That seems like kind of like middle of the set on the Roadhouse stage. It's a good tune.
Yeah.
It reminds me of thematically. It reminds me of like Randy Newman, Baltimore. Do you know that song? Oh, Baltimore, man, it's hard just to live. And it's like it opens talking about like a seagull with like with one leg, and like it's just like these kind of like signs of this, totally broken down city. And that's kind of what the Freedy one does too. It's something like a barefoot whore or something like, it's like starts pretty much right in the middle of that. That's it's not one of my top tracks from the record, but it's interesting.
I think exactly the same, actually. I didn't actually have much to say about this song. Kind of sounds like an experience with a prostitute.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I mean, like if you kind of analyze the lyrics, or if you kind of really sit down and read the lyrics like all the way through, it's just like, that kind of sounds like not a great night out with a local prostitute.
Right.
But not that the subject, like not that subject wise that these are the same, but considering the nature of the title being Can't Sink This Town, it made me think about your new song on your new album, Lonely Mare.
Oh, okay, cool.
Can you tell me like where that song came from?
I read a piece that a lot of people saw in the New York Times magazine about Ed Koch and about how he had been closeted for his entire career, and he kind of felt that he just couldn't come out for political reasons. And in later years, much later, he didn't actually exactly come out, but he started trying to live as a gay man, and found a lot of trouble connecting people, finding a community, being accepted by a community, because of a lot of the things that he was doing when he was a mayor during the AIDS crisis was kind of seen as hostile to the gay community. And so it's just, this is the idea of choices that a person makes, and how they play out in ways that we can't really control, or just like what is the cost of a trade-off for ambition, essentially. So the chorus of it is, he's in, he's out of power now, or he's ready to begin. He chose his fate, he's much too late, the city shrugs again. And so it's just, the idea that he's always running. He's running for office, but he's running from his true self in a lot of
Right.
ways, and this real identity,
Yeah.
I find really compelling.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and like, as I'm not familiar with politics at all. I mean, the name sounds familiar, and like, obviously, like, I feel like I know a little bit about that story. I've heard about it, but I have not delved into it at all. He was the mayor of your existing city in Chapel Hill, or
No, he was mayor of New York City in the
New York
70s and
City.
80s. Yeah.
That's okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is a
He was a
historical
big
context then.
guy, yeah. And
Yeah.
he became later, a kind of a political commentator on television and everything. And so he was kind of he's a personality, a big
Yeah.
personality.
Okay. Because I mean, I had no idea. So I didn't know to put into the context of where you're living currently or
Right.
not. Because Chapel Hill, I mean, Chapel Hill's a great city. I've actually been there a
Sure.
lot.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've actually been. North Carolina in general has been one of those states for a band I used to be in that we practically lived there. Like
Oh,
we were at
cool.
Chapel Hill all the time.
What was the band?
Barn burning?
Okay. Where
Yeah.
are you guys? Where are you based out of?
Providence, Rhode Island.
Oh, Providence. Okay, cool.
I'm not in the band anymore.
Okay, gotcha. Though. Yeah.
But at the time, specifically in the early 2000s, is when we were kind of doing most of our touring.
Right.
So yeah, we did spent a
Us
lot of
too.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
You 2002, you said you started, right? So
2004 with the band with Old Ceremony.
oh, okay. But you moved to North Carolina in
Into
2002.
yeah, no two. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's so. Yeah, I was around there somewhere at some
Cool.
time.
Very
You
cool.
know, getting to know the music scene.
Yeah.
We actually, because you used to be on Yep Rock, right?
Yeah. All right, we put out our last two records on Yep Rock.
Okay. Because I remember we actually did a show with $2 Pistols.
Oh yeah, John Howie is a good buddy.
Oh yeah, yeah. John, that's his name. Because I
Uh-huh.
remember he used to be the bartender at that bar we played.
The Cave.
The Cave.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure. That's the first place I played in Chapel Hill.
Oh,
Everybody.
cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody plays there first.
Everybody plays there at some point. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great spot. Great.
Mhm.
I got to get down there again at some
Yeah.
point
Come on
soon.
down, man. Drop me a line.
Sure, sure. I love it. I love it down there. So let's see. We're gonna move on to This Perfect World, the title track.
Oh yeah.
So brief description. The title track concerns a dying old man returning to apologize to his estranged daughter for unspecified past misdeeds.
Yeah. So right. More trauma.
Yeah, yeah, lots of it too.
Yeah.
So this song has a whole lot of baggage to unpack.
It
okay?
does.
Yeah. So, because I mean, like, I got into a lot of, like, I read a lot of things about this song, and so, that brief description is kind of only one part of it. It seems like, and I followed along with the lyrics, and I was just like, okay, yeah, I do see it. At some point, the mother of this child that he is singing to or speaking to in the
Right.
song commits suicide.
Oh wow. Yeah. Huh.
So, lots.
Yeah, and I still deserve to say goodbye no matter what I've done. Yeah, right. That's him
That's-
saying that to the daughter. Right.
Right, that he abandoned, that he,
Right.
like, walked away from.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, I guess the main thing here, or at least the thing that I kind of wanted to touch on, was that line in the chorus. But I still deserve to say goodbye no matter what I've done. Thinking about today's standards and cancel culture, maybe is this true? Does somebody deserve that who's been so like devious in his life?
Well, to come back to one of my patron saints, Randy Newman, the thing is, writing in the voice of somebody,
Right.
it's not, you can't interpret it that way.
Oh no, I'm not
I mean,
saying this
you-
about Freedy. I'm saying this about the character.
Right, but what I'm saying is the only way to write in the voice of an unsavory person is to find empathy for their point of view, and so it's not whether anyone else thinks he deserves it; it's whether he thinks he deserves it, which he does. And I think that's that's what makes things work. If you write about a character that you don't have any kind of empathy for, it's just kind of pointing your finger at him, and that's something that I learned a lot. I would suspect that Freedy is also, and we'll have to ask him when he listens to this, is a Randy Newman fan as well, and because let's talk about a songwriter. I mean, there's
Oh yeah,
almost no one better.
I love Randy Newman. I really
Yeah,
do.
I do too, and and in fact, there's that Randy Newman song "Old Man."
Oh yes.
Where a son is coming back to his dying father's, and so it's from the point of view of the son, and he's just like, "Hey, you told me not to cry, old man, so see you later." Like it's like this wrenching song.
Oh, yeah.
But it's, kind of similar, but from a different point of view.
Right.
A difficult relationship with the dying parent. So,
Yeah. I wanted to get into Cold again, but from my perspective, what I see this as is it sounds to me like a very much a New York song, basically. So,
Cold again? Yeah, totally. He was living in New York.
Right. A lot of references, a lot of landmarks that are mentioned. And so I was going to ask you about your time in New York City.
I think, that, and also even back to Bad Reputation, Suddenly I'm in Herald Square, another New York reference. And I think there is that feeling of, Freedy was there maybe 4 years before me, but still feeling like that soundtrack was kind of part of my soundtrack as I moved to New York and kind of moved into that scene. And, and so I think, it's hard. If you live in New York, it's very hard not to write about New York. It's just it's such a self-mythologizing place, both on an individual level and as a city, that it's kind of irresistible to write about.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I definitely have had a lot of inspiration from that city. So let's move down this list a little further. Let's go to Across the Avenue.
Ooh, yeah.
So let's see. Now, though this album was produced by Butch Vig in 1994,
right,
being prime grunge time,
right,
this album lacks really heavy rockers.
Yeah.
But like this one, I feel like it's the closest to that, primarily because the intro kind of has this like snarling kind of introduction to it.
Yeah.
Like there's a few moments over the album, but not really much of it. But you lean into some heavy ones yourself.
Occasionally.
On the new album in particular. I mean, you have the Ripper about Valerie Solanas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Ripper, I love that. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
I mean, it's the Ripper of the album, I think.
Yeah, it rips. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I mean, so you have no problem with like, obviously digging out these occasional like really barn burners is what they call them, I think, right?
Yeah, exactly. TM. The blast of aggression. Yeah, I'm totally comfortable with that every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, so how does your band feel about that? Because like, obviously you guys cover a lot of different styles, you cover a lot of ground.
Well, that's the one thing about the band is, they're really versatile. And it's not hard to find players who can play rock and roll, but it's hard to find players who can play rock and roll and play kind of jazz stuff, and everything else. And they're all really great musicians who have a lot of different interests. Gabe, who is the violin and second guitar player, he has a gypsy jazz group that he runs, and Mark, the vibraphone and organ player, plays in a billion different things. And so everyone kind of has. And the bass player is a DJ and also does a lot of dub reggae stuff. So there's just there's this understanding that everyone kind of brings a wide enough range of interests musically and experience that they could kind of handle anything. To be honest, the rocking stuff, it took us longer to get really good and comfortable with that, I think, than everything else, which is funny because it's kind of the simplest stuff, but it's just such a different approach to playing. It's just kind of like, the sledgehammer, if you're not used to using it, it shows. And I think now we really enjoy playing that kind of stuff, but only in small doses because, we want to protect our hearing.
Oh, sure. That brings up an interesting point. I'm curious, on your perspective, who do you think that you would compare yourself to musically, like your band compared to another one? Like, who do you think you're most like?
That's a really tough one. I mean, when we started, before we even started the band, I'd made a list of kind of influences that I wanted to really kind of draw on for the formation of this band. And it was like, Leonard Cohen, obviously, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, Tom Waits, Serge Gainsbourg, Astor Piazzolla, the Argentinian tango guy. A lot of stuff, but it just all has this kind of cinematic, dark, like Bernard Herrmann a little bit, the Hitchcock composer, even like Morricone, just, things that have there's a certain aesthetic that kind of ties all that together. It's kind of European, kind of dark, kind of moody,
Mm-hmm.
but over the years, it's, total. I mean, we still do a lot of that kind of. Lonely Mayor maybe is an example of a kind of a noir-y song from the new record, but there's also folky stuff that could just be on a on a folk record.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure. Okay. But so no band you can think of that you think is just like this is probably maybe the best kind of like image of us or mirror image like
it's tough, man. I don't
no.
really. I mean, I think Wilco in its current incarnation,
Hmm.
because it's so song focused, but it's such a band
Yeah.
where everyone plays and everyone's great, is a little bit like that,
Okay.
but without some of those influences. So it's not a one to one, but I would say that's a
Yeah.
real general close one.
Okay. I can agree with that. So now the last thing I want to touch on because we're running short on time is I was saying earlier how I feel like there is a connection in this album, and I
Hmm.
think I made it between the next song, Gone Like Water, Gone Like the
Oh,
Water.
down to NYC.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
then the last song, I can hear the laughs.
I
I
love
feel
that
like
song.
they're,
Yeah.
oh no, actually, no, I'm sorry. Gone Like the Water and Disappointed Man.
Oh,
Those two
Disappointed
are
Man.
kind
Oh,
of
okay, yeah.
similar. And I
Hmm.
think that that's a theme because it actually sounds like it kind of touches on drug use.
I see. Yeah, yeah.
Like
That
a
makes
like a drug
sense.
addict. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Uh,
Um,
on this river running down, he's gone like the water down the sea. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I think people have certain kind of proclivities for writing types of characters, types of situations, types of
Hmm.
stories, and I think maybe more. I mean, we'd have to ask him, but I think more likely than it being specifically thinking this is the same guy. I think it's just maybe just something that he kind of gets preoccupied with thinking about, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But who knows? That's the
Okay.
beauty of it. We don't have to know what he thought. We don't
Right,
really
right.
care.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's true. So last song, I can hear the laughs.
Love it.
Now, this is my last point to make with you. I can hear the laughs when they find I've fallen down again is the line that sticks out to me.
Uh huh.
And I know from what I've heard from Freedy in interviews, he could definitely is definitely seen as a kind of a self-deprecating
Uh huh.
character. And to make a statement like that in a song makes me feel like this is an honest moment leaking out.
Yeah. It does feel honest. Yeah.
In closing, with your new album approaching its release and with the press inevitably coming with it, how do you handle criticism at this point in your career?
Hopefully with humor. I mean, I think having kids. I have two kids. They're 10 and 6.
Mhm.
I think that's helped a lot with my humility. I call it the great humbling, becoming a parent,
Sure.
and it also really helps with my perspective. So I don't take it as seriously. It's still I want everyone to like me, as Randy Newman says, but it's you know I, I feel happy if people like it, and if they don't or they have criticism, I'll listen to it, but I'm not gonna take it too
Yeah.
personally,
You're not going to lose
because I
sleep over
know
it.
I know that everything is individual and someone's taste, and I've had so much rejection over the 30 years of playing professionally that what's a little more, and and honestly, to me, I don't expect everybody to like it. I mean, because I'm not trying to guess what everybody's going to like. I'm just trying to write songs that I like, and then we're trying to make a record that we like. And that's the
Hmm.
best thing I think we can do, because there's no way to anticipate it. And back to Freedy for a second. I mean, I think when he did this record, I mean, I think he was just making a record that he liked.
Hmm.
I mean, certainly if you think about 2004, kind of end of grunge, it wasn't really of the time particularly. It was outside of the time in terms of the trends of music.
Wait, this
Um,
album? This
yeah.
album was released in 94.
Oh, 94. Sorry, 94. Yeah, yeah. Even
Yeah,
more so. Right. So it's in the midst of the grunge thing.
right.
Sorry, I can't keep my decades straight.
That's okay.
But and I think that's what I loved about it. I was like, oh, this is something I can relate to amid this sea of drop D tuning.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it lasts. I think, I listened back to 10, which I loved at the time as well, the Pearl Jam record, and I can see why it was popular, but it doesn't hold up as well for me.
Hmm.
Um, I think rightly or wrongly, but I think it's because it was so specifically of that time. Without that context, you know, it's missing an element that made it really work at the time. And I think being outside of the time, I like to hope, because all my records feel like they're outside of what's happening,
Sure.
allows it to just exist in its own kind of universe. And you
Yeah.
can come to it, and if you like it, great. And if you don't, someone might like it later because it's not tied to any particular moment.
Yeah, no, and that's actually a very kind of great observation to make from your own, like, of yourself, really.
Right.
Because I don't think I would have put it into those words, but I think that is actually perfect going forward, kind of like, what we can tell people about that or would be interested in listening to your band, The Old Ceremony, that it is a very much of its own world. So
Great.
either catch on to it or not, but it's going to be there for you whenever you're ready for it.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, that sounds great to me. I love that.
You came up with it, so
Well, hey,
it's your
I like
doing.
hearing it back.
Okay. Well, we're gonna go forward with that then, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you and getting to know you
Yeah,
better,
really
Django.
enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, and I'll hopefully catch up with you sometime on tour.
Sounds great.